Glad everyone's here and that we are here today for the third webinar in the TOS, SWMS, and MPOWIR webinar series on unlocking the hidden curriculum, with this particular series focused on scientific writing and communications. My name is Katie Gallagher, and I'm the current president of SWMS, or the Society for Women in Marine Sciences. Our organization, I will just introduce briefly, verbally, since we started a little late, but our mission is to bring together marine scientists of all levels to discuss the diverse experience of women and marginalized genders in marine sciences and celebrate their research and promote the visibility of those folks in those spaces. We have local chapters that operate and do a lot of great work at the grassroots level, and then we have a overarching steering committee that helps organize those chapters and also facilitates professional development webinars, such as this one. I'll turn it over to Sarah next to introduce MPOWIR really quickly.
Sure, thanks, Katie. I'm Sarah Clem. I am the program coordinator for MPOWIR, which is Mentoring Physical Oceanography Women to Increase Retention. And our programs primarily center around mentoring, and we're a community-led organization that is aimed at improving retention of women in physical oceanography. Our main activities are mentor groups that meet monthly. They're small groups with 2 facilitators and 6 early career scientists. And then we also do professional development workshops and conferences, webinar series like this one, speaking opportunity at NASA, and events at scientific meetings, and then collect and write statistics around gender and science.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Jenny, do you want to introduce TOS real quick, or would you like me to share your slides again?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and share the slide?
Yeah, I can do that.
That'd be awesome. And I'm Jenny Ramarui. I'm the executive director of the Oceanography Society. And as you can see from what's on the screen, we're a membership organization of researchers, policymakers, agency reps worldwide. And we want to facilitate communication among all the disciplines of oceanography. And we do that by co-convening the Ocean Sciences Meeting and the Ocean Optics Conference. And we also, very importantly, publish Oceanography Magazine and have been doing that for 38 years. It's fully open access. And Ellen Capel, our editor-in-chief, will be able to tell you more about that. So thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. So we're going to dive right into it. Today we have an awesome panel of speakers who are going to be telling us all about how to navigate the journal submission process. So last week we learned about how and why we write scientific papers. From the author's perspective, this time we're going to be going on to that next step. Once you've finished your manuscript, you have to submit it somewhere. So we are going to be talking about that today. I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists. So first we have Professor Charitha Paracharachi. Sorry, Chari, I totally butchered that. And Chari is a leader in the field of coastal oceanography at the University of Western Australia, located in Perth. Using novel techniques, including ocean gliders, his major discoveries include dense shelf water transport, tsunami impacts, and the Lewin current system. Chari is a strong mentor to the next generation of researchers and developed a world-renowned research and training program for early career researchers and graduate students in coastal oceanography. To date, he has supervised more than 338 individuals, including being the primary supervisor of 302 dissertations. Additionally, he has authored or co-authored over 500 publications within over 200 different peer-reviewed journals. So Chari really knows what he's talking about here. And in addition to receiving the Mentoring Award from the Oceanography Society in 2024, he is also a finalist in West Australian's Premier Scientist of the Year Award for 2025. Next, we have Laurel Falkenberg, who is the editor of Limnology and Oceanography Bulletin, which is a journal of ASLO, which is the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. She's also a lecturer in human dimensions of the environment at the University of South Australia, where her research and teaching focuses on the impacts of global change on coastal marine organisms, the ecosystems they form, and services provided to human societies. Laura is also interested how we do and share science, have been published on topics such as curriculum development, citizen science, publishing, and peer review. Next, we have Ellen Capel, who is the president of GeoPros, holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in geology from Cornell University and a PhD in marine geology and geophysics from Columbia University. Ellen has been on more than a dozen research cruises in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans to study mid-ocean ridge tectonics and assist in deploying deep-towed side sand sonars and camera systems. After postdoctoral work, Ellen moved to Washington, D.C. as a program manager with the Ocean Drilling Program at Joint Oceanographic Institutions. In 1999, she established GeoPros, where she works with community members in academia and government to produce compelling documents that make the case for funding major geosciences programs. And as Jenny mentioned, Ellen is also the editor of Oceanography magazine, a position she has held for more than 2 decades. And then finally, we have Dr. Frank C. Akamagwana, who is a freshwater ecologist and postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Alabama, where he investigates how stressors such as nutrient enrichment, sedimentation, and plastic pollution affect freshwater ecosystems, ecosystem structure, and function. His work integrates stable isotope analysis, trait-based biomonitoring, and computational modeling to explore ecosystem resilience and nutrient dynamics. As the 2024 to 2026 ASLO Rail and Coal Editorial Fellow, he is leading a global survey on the use of AI in scientific writing, and he currently serves on the board of the Society for Freshwater Sciences as an early career representative. So we've got a lot of really great expertise in the room today, and we're really excited to be learning from them. So first, I guess I will open the floor, I guess starting with Ellen, because you are first on my screen. Can you all just please give a brief overview of the journals that you have or currently work with, and what your role sort of is at these journals so we can get a better idea of your roles there?
Sure. As Jenny and others have said, I'm editor-in-chief of Oceanography, and Oceanography is in the vast group of journals that are out there. We're a less technical journal, so looking for more review papers or just in general, our goal is to communicate across ocean sciences. So we're less technical. We try not to have jargon, lots of equations. So you know, if you're shooting for something, you know, an article that's very technical, another journal would probably be where you would want to go. If you're looking for, you know, to broaden, you know, tell a broad audience of oceanographers and others what your research is about, then you know, and in language that everybody would understand, then Oceanography is for you. That said, we are, like all these other journals, we're peer reviewed, we're open access. Just this past year, we moved from doing print and online to just online only, but we also offer, with each issue that we put out, we do flip books where I'm sure everybody's seen them, a lot of the journals do them where it's web-based and you can flip on your screen through the journal as if not quite the same as flipping through paper, but you can, the experience is supposed to be similar to that. But the special thing with these flip books is we can embed videos and audio files and photo galleries and GIF animations, making your articles a bit more interactive and interesting. As for my role is, first I report directly to the Oceanography Society Council. I steer the magazine or journal in terms of content, and I also have a board of about 10 associate editors who also help with peer review and soliciting manuscripts and generally helping me with what the content should be. Yeah, and I have, my main job is I have all final say on all editorial issues, and I'm absolutely fully responsible for everything we publish. The buck stops at my desk. So I think that's about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellen. How about we have Laura go next? Because I know LNO Bulletin is somewhat similar in scope to the Oceanography magazine.
Yeah, sure thing. Nice to see everyone today. So yeah, I'm Laura Falkenberg, and I'm here in my role as editor of the Limnology and Oceanography Bulletin. So LNO Bulletin is the community journal for ASLO, so this Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography. And that means it's a bit different to a lot of the other journals that you're probably used to. We're more aimed at a general audience. We don't do a traditional peer review process. And so it's a great opportunity to get experience writing different styles of pieces and potentially also for broader audiences. So we have longer main articles that are more similar to, I guess, a review style piece that people might be familiar with. We also publish viewpoints where people can argue a perspective on a topical issue in marine or aquatic sciences. We have ASLO and community news items to let people stay aware of what's going on within the community. We have meeting highlights, and often that will focus on the ASLO meetings, but also other meetings that are going on. And we also have book reviews. So when people write a book, they'll send it to us. We have a list of potential reviewers, and if you'd like to join that list, you can let me know. And then, yeah, we publish book reviews in the bulletin. We're always looking for pieces and always looking for pieces also from early career researchers. That's not sort of a limit on publishing of the bulletin. And I'm also happy to chat about what goes on and what would be a good fit for the bulletin, because it is a bit different to a traditional journal. Having said that, my role is that of a sort of traditional journal editor. I oversee all the pieces as they come through. I work with a team of 3 associate editors who also look at the pieces for me. And because the bulletin's a bit different, those are targeted to be early career researchers. And we're going to be putting out a call probably early next year for another one of those. So if you'd like to get a bit of experience in that, keep an eye out or let me know and I can forward the announcement when it comes through. And just a bit about my background in publishing. So I was actually the first Raylene Cole Fellow with ASLO, so the position that Frank's in now, and I'm sure he'll talk more about what that program is. And that's primarily associated, or when I was involved, was primarily associated with LNO letters. So I have a bit of experience with that journal. I'm also an associate editor with marine biology. Have guest edited a theme section for Marine Ecology Progress series, and I'm sort of an ad hoc reviewer for a bunch of different journals as they approach me. So as well as this sort of different kind of journal in the bulletin, I do have experience with traditional journals and peer review.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I think you queued up Frank very nicely to go next, so I will ask Frank to introduce himself.
No worries. Thanks a lot, and thanks for the opportunity. So I don't have an editorial role, so I'm at the lower spectrum of the pyramid. But my role, so it means I don't have a role in terms of editorial fellowship. I am the current Raylene Cole Fellow, just like Laura mentioned. So the fellowship is basically to provide editorial experience or editorial training for early career researchers across the spectrum of scientific writing and open access publication, peer review processes, and a lot of the editorial processes. So as the current fellow, so we work directly with the 4 editors of ASLO's journals. the limnology and oceanography. I work with the director. The limnology and oceanography method, which is basically ASLO journal that focus on developing new method in aquatic sciences. I also work directly with the editor of Limnology and Oceanography Bulletin, which is Laura here. And of course, the Limnology and Oceanography, which is the flagship journal for ASLO. So my role is basically to work with these editors, gain experience and training around how editorial processes works. I organize the meeting every month to ensure that the fellowship continues. I also attend ASLO conferences, present my work, the activities of the fellowship in ASLO conferences. But as also part of the fellowship, I'm also involved in conducting a project on AI and the use in scientific writing, which is actually a project that is actually currently going. Which is one of the things that actually got me very fascinated in this section. So it would also be good to share some of those insights. So my role basically is to provide early career perspective on the discussions that will be going on today and also learn in the process. So that is me, and thank you for the opportunity over here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Frank. And last but not least, I'll just ask Charlie to sort of introduce what your experience is with sort of, we talked a lot about your experience, obviously writing manuscripts last week, but give us an idea of sort of what you've done on the other side of the coin.
On the other side, my editorial actually started 35 years ago when Continental Shelf Research started, which is basically who was my supervisor. So I was involved quite heavily with that, and I've actually carried on. So at the moment, I was sort of associate editor for Continental Shelf Research for about 15 years, and now associate editor for Progress in Oceanography. I'm editor-in-chief for the Journal of Marine Science and Engineering, and it's the MDPI journal. And I'm also specialty chief editor for Frontiers in Marine Science for coastal ocean processes. I'm also editing a special issue of Ocean Science on the application of gliders at the moment. So I can give you a whole wide experience of how the different journals work and how they actually are so different.
Yes, for sure. Thank you all for those introductions. We're now going to sort of start talking about how we submit journal papers to different journals. Before we jump into that, I do want to remind folks that if you have questions, our chat is open. And so if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as they come up, and we will get to them. At the end, we'll have a dedicated Q&A. So be sure to start thinking of those questions. But first, I guess I'll start with sort of the most broad question is you've already written this manuscript and now you have to figure out where to submit it to. So how do you find the best journal for your manuscript? And I know, Laura, you had some insights on this you wanted to share.
Sure. So I think there are a few different ways you can go about it. I suppose one of the easy ways is because you've written your manuscript, where have the papers that you've referenced been published? Chances are, if they're in a particular journal, in a particular group, they are going to lead you to a similar kind of journal. The other thing is increasingly a lot of publishers will have tools. So for example, Wiley, which is the publisher for the L&O family of journals, has what's called the Wiley Journal Finder. And so you can use that to identify within the Wiley family of journals. Having said that, it is publisher specific. So there are also tools like Jane, the journal author name estimator, that you can use. once you've identified potential journals, think about like the scope and the aims of those journals. Does your topic align with it? Is it similar to things that they've published before? Obviously, asking more experienced colleagues, mentors, co-authors is always a good place. And then the other thing that I sometimes do, because I do publish a bit of sort of interdisciplinary research or research outside of strictly marine science and where I've been trained, is think about where your readers might be. Who are you trying to reach with this piece? And even if your piece isn't necessarily similar to others that have been published in that journal, if you think that's where the people you're interested might find it, consider trying to submit to something perhaps a bit outside your usual family of journals.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Ellen, I see you have your hand up. You're on mute, Ellen.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Actually more of a question, because I do think that sometimes it's worth, before you even put pen to paper, deciding what journal is best for your science, because each journal has different guidelines, different types of things they're looking for. And so, you know, it maybe not always, but I think sometimes it is actually good to have length considerations and figure considerations and all different kinds of considerations, that sometimes it's actually better, you know, deciding beforehand. And, you know, maybe there are 3 different journals, but deciding beforehand, narrowing down the journals before, you know, you actually start writing and outlining what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shari, what do you have to add there? You're also on mute.
I was going to reiterate what Ellen was basically saying. You have to sort of have an idea, because some journals have 8,000 words and 4 display items, and some actually have 12 figures, 15 figures, like Progress in Oceanography. There's no limit. There's sort of encouraging review papers. So you need to have some sort of an idea before you start writing. Another consideration in terms of a journal, also think about your own sort of position in terms of in your career. Some journals, it's a long time for the review. It might take 12 months or more to actually get your paper published. And there are others which might be a little bit more rapid. So it would be worthwhile. When I was a graduate student, I used to go to the journals and actually look. You know, it actually says submitted what day and accepted what day. And it actually tells you in each one of those how long it takes. So in a way, sometimes the paper is efficient, sometimes they're not that efficient in terms of the handling part. So that, you know, it's sort of personal sort of circumstances as well, and also sort of also your how would you say, your prestige to a certain extent as well, right? I'm a physical oceanographer, and it actually says that you can't call yourself a physical oceanographer unless you have published a paper in the Journal of Physical Oceanography. But Journal of Physical Oceanography has a very low, relatively low impact factor, and it will take a year for you to get published. So those are the decisions that you would actually have to take into account about choosing.
All right, I'm going to go to Frank next because we haven't heard from Frank.
Yes, so I mean, I just wanted to reiterate what Shari just said when it comes to preparing and identifying the key journals. I mean, one thing I want to add is, I think you'd also remember that you can also write these editors. If you're not too sure of if your paper, for example, fits a particular journal, you can as well reach out. Some of these editors are, I mean, when I talk to, I work with these editors a lot, Laura, Jim, and co, they always say that we value your insight. You can always reach out to us, and we are happy to provide insights as you decide which journal to submit your paper. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's a good thing to add, Frank. I feel like we're always sort of intimidated by reaching out to folks and asking those questions. So it's a good thing to remember that that's always an option on the table. Sort of similar to that, I think our next question involves predatory journals, which are becoming more and more prevalent in the field of marine science in general. And Ellen, I know you had some thoughts on this that you wanted to share.
Though I'm no expert on this, and I don't think there is a magic bullet here. But, kind of like what we've already been talking about, you want to see where your colleagues are publishing. You check the journal websites and review process. And very importantly, look at who is on that editorial board. You want to see, do you recognize any of the names? Or are they from, institutions and like Frank said, it's important. Reach out, to them if you're not sure. I mean, but I think mainly, it's looking, where your colleagues are publishing their work, and that's the most important part, and the editorial board part.
Yeah, Chari, go for it.
Yeah. The other thing is that just make sure that if you get bombarded with emails about submit to this journal, we're waiting for 1 pager or 2 pages, that's all predatory. Don't go there. So the usual thing is that make sure that it is got a registered with ISI or it's got an impact factor. And sort of my experience with both Frontiers and Journal of Marine Science and Engineering, I actually was part of both of those journals to actually get them registered. So it's about 12 years ago it started. And it took about 3 or 4 years of publishing for it to actually get certification. And it's very, very difficult. People don't realize how tough the standards are to get accepted. So it's a sort of a first stick that you look to be able to say whether it's predatory or not, is to say whether they're actually registered and got impact factors.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And I guess just to take a step back, because I realized for those that may not be familiar with the term predatory journal, these are like the type of journals, like Chari said, that will spam your spam box and try to get you to submit a 1-pager or something very simple, basically just to take your money and take your grant money. They're not really interested in trying to share your work or anything like that. They are just trying to get your money. So those are the things you want to be aware of. So we figured out how to which journal we want to submit to. Often at this time in the manuscript, when you go to the portal and you start to submit, I think one of the first things you're often asked to do is list your author order, which is something that we get a lot of conflicting information about and changes depending on the discipline. It changed for me very different. It was very different from my PhD to my postdoc work. So how do you figure out author order? And Laura, I know you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I guess my thoughts touch on something that you've already raised in your intros, that it is, even though we're probably, I guess, raised in a particular discipline with their particular rules, as I've gone and worked in different disciplines, it has been different rules, different protocols or standards or just approaches. And so I think, similar to thinking about where you're going to publish, thinking about authorship order early on is very important, because that will potentially also shape how people are contributing to a paper, because potentially that will sort of indicate how much effort, how much resources they've put in. To talk about sort of marine science generally, typically your first author will be the person who led the work, usually a student, led the experiments. The final author or the final couple of authors will be the lab heads, the senior researchers or PIs who secured the funding, who oversaw all of the work. And then the middle authors kind of ranked on contribution, but that can get, again, messy depending on who thinks they've done what. And so sometimes you'll see things like these credit statements where you can then go into more detail and tick like exactly which aspects different people contributed to. And so that can help clarify. And I did also want to raise that along with authorship order, for some regions and disciplines, who is the corresponding author can also be an important decision, because that can sort of indicate the role that they played in the manuscript. So also talking about who has that role early on can be important, and just making sure everyone has the same expectations of what's going to happen. That's not to say that as the project develops and you need to shift roles in the team and someone needs to take on, it can change. But talking about it at the beginning through the process so that when you come to submit, it's not a surprise to people, because I think that's where you can potentially run into issue.
Yeah, does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll go again. Because it's different, you know. I didn't actually realize, I was naive up until about 5 years ago, after publishing, you know, more than 150 papers or whatever, what it meant to be the last author. It never actually came into my life, because in physical oceanography or mathematics or physics, the person who does the is actually the level of who actually does the work. Right? So you will see that usually the person who writes the paper, that's the hardest part, not necessarily that the experimentation. The person who writes the paper is the first author, and then the next one. So if you look at a lot of mine, I'm usually the second or third author. I've never actually been the last author unless there were two authors in a way. So it's different. And then if you have lots of authors, then you actually might have in the middle alphabetically listed. So you might have the first 2 or 3 authors who did the most work, and then if you have 10 other authors who contributed, they would be listed as alphabetically to go through. But in my experience also, this is, you know, there's a lot of conflict happens in choosing people want to be the last author, and I'm this, that, and the other. And I've actually, you know, in my different roles, I've actually had to send people to official arbitration to be able to define which order there is. One good thing also is that there is several tools you can actually find on the web, like a scoring sheet, which actually tells you whether you should be included as an author and etc. So if you actually get into conflict, that's a good tool to actually start using, because it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, for sure. I've started seeing those in the past few years. Frank.
Oh yes, so I just wanted to, add for those that are students. I'm not sure the diversity of the audience. So one of the things when it comes to author ordering and who comes first and who doesn't come first, I know it varies, but one thing I will add to that is, if you're a student working in a lab, always speak to your supervisors, because they know best. Sometimes, depending on the kind of project that you're involved in, such a project that might even have other collaborators that are involved in that project. Sometimes the supervisor, which is always the last author, like as Shari just said, always know who comes within that authorship. Because I've had issues around here where students, a particular student here in UA, started writing articles from his dissertation. When he was sending it to the supervisor, he added a range of authors from everywhere and everywhere. That actually raised a lot of issues, because, and when he was called, he said he didn't know, he doesn't know that he's not even allowed to add extra authors. So my addition is always speak to the supervisor in the lab.
Yeah, that's good advice too. They usually have really good insights and can help you figure out, especially those tricky spots. Ellen, do you have anything brief to add before we sort of move on?
Yeah, it'll be really quick. And I wanted to pick up on something that Laura said. And perhaps I'm naive, but I really hope that you don't submit an article, a manuscript to the journal where your authors have not seen it, that they don't know that they're on there. I've only experienced that once, where at the very end, when the article, people have to sign off on an article because, you know, they have to sign, you know, their publication licenses and all, that somebody said, I read their article and said, you know, I didn't ask to be on this, and I don't believe that what some of that was said. I withdraw my authorship. I've only had that once, but anyway, I do hope and expect that your co-authors all know that they're on a manuscript and have actually read it, even if they're not giving you any comments, that they know they're there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go for it,
Can I
Charlie.
quickly add just a personal one that I actually going to say? When I was interviewed and I got my first job, the first thing my supervisor said, any papers coming out of this project, I'm going to be the first author. So I was naive and I agreed, you know, but it never happened. I was first author on many of them. We swapped back and forth, but that was the condition that I got the job. So
yeah, definitely. I've heard of that happening as well, and it's good to debate those things, even though there's a bit of a power dynamic there. But I want to also circle back to what Ellen said, because that's sort of a big reason why we're doing this series, is to sort of shed those light on those things that you might not be taught by your advisor, although you should be. So yes, definitely part of this step, and I believe we touched on it last week in Chari's presentation, but make sure that at least all of your co-authors have had the opportunity to provide feedback on your papers. Like Ellen said, they might not actually give you feedback, but make sure that it's been in their inbox at least once.
But now I think most journals will actually, when you submit, will write to the co-authors to confirm that they are actually aware of the paper has been come up.
For sure. So I want to switch gears a little bit now and talk a bit about the review process. So once you've gone through the online portal and sort of submitted the paper, your paper hopefully enters review. An editor, such as the folks we have here, will probably, an associate editor will probably do some quick checks to make sure you have everything you need. But then your paper will go into review. So what should people expect from that process if they haven't experienced before? Like, how long should it take, and what are the usual outcomes? Frank, do you want to take this one?
Oh, yes, thanks, Gertrude. I think when it comes to expectation, I mean, the first thing I would add is that to keep in mind for folks that are here is that the review process varies a lot, depends on the journal. Some journal, I mean, the first stage is always the editorial screening. Maybe sometimes take one or two weeks, depending on the journal. The next step may probably be maybe the peer review process, which normally always take the longest period. Sometimes depending on the journal, 4 to 8 weeks. But also the next step would then be the decision making, the revision from the author. But again, it does not sometimes only depends on the review process. The time, it also depends on the author themselves. The time you take as an author to revert the review to the revision to the journal also plays a very key role in what to expect. For me, when it comes to expectation and dealing with review processes, one thing is I always keep in mind is to know that the peer review is a process that actually advances knowledge. And if that be the case, it means that you should expect critical review. You should expect some papers to be rejected. You should expect major revision. And when that comes, you should accept accept the fact that these are revisions are given for you to actually better that manuscript or improve that particular manuscript. So you can expect a major revision, you can expect minor revision when the article has gone for review. You can also expect that in the end, the paper can be published. But in the end, it all depends on, the expectation depends on the journal in question.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I think that was a good overview. Ellen, I know you also had some thoughts on this, and then we'll go to Laura.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go back for a second to a question we skipped over about, oh, maybe you took it out about about reviewers, and I wanted to address that briefly, and then go into the review process more. So, most journals, and certainly we do, one question when you're submitting your manuscript, you have reviewer suggestions, and we find that super helpful, because sometimes it's, the oceanographic papers, so you're looking for people who have no real or perceived conflicts of interest, reviewers. So no reviewers from any institutions where you or your co-authors work. No reviewers who have, maybe, this is pretty subjective, but, have been close collaborators within the last few years. So we just don't want anything to look like there's a conflict of interest in the review, that they'd be favoring a review for any reason. And that's, super helpful to have those reviewers. Now, having said that, the review process, most of the journals strive to have as short a review process as possible. In the current environment, it is super difficult, and it has gotten worse over the years. I know that I've worked with papers, and it's not unusual for me to ask 15 people to review a paper and to get maybe 2 or 3 out of 15. And then to get reviewers to actually return reviews on time, so we strive for about, 6 weeks, 2 months to get reviews back. Often it's up to 6 months these days, 5 or 6 months, because the reviewers aren't doing their jobs, even though they said they would. So, I just want to tell you, it may be a frustrating process for the younger people who expect when a journal says we endeavor to return reviews within 2 months or 3 months or whatever, and it's 6, 7 months and you still haven't heard. These are some of the reasons. It's not that we're not trying. It's just the review process. Everybody is so busy and overwhelmed and have so many responsibilities, and sometimes the reviews just are not top of the list to, when you have a proposal to put in, you have your own manuscript deadlines. Anyway, I need to go on, but that's my 2 cents. Feel a little sympathy for the editors and associate editors trying to get your paper through peer review.
Yeah, no,
Ellen, my record is 65 invites for 0 return.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not there. I'm only in the low 20s.
So the other thing is that, finding the reviewers, if you're suggesting, it could be good to actually say, I'm going to suggest. So you contact the person you're going to review, said, this is my paper, can I actually nominate you? And if they say yes, well, you've got a chance of actually getting it back. That helps the editor a lot. The other thing is that when I have nothing, I actually goes to the reference list. I goes to the references, and then I look at people. And so look at your references and then look at and pick one. The other thing that you also very careful is selecting. Most journals require you to do a keyword search to actually list 3 or 4 keywords. So now with AI, what they actually do is that you have reviewers in the pool who have those. So it automatically gets matched in some of the journals. So even when you put on Scopus, like, Elsevier's got a tool. So I said, can you match this journal with suggest some reviewers, and that suggestions comes from the keywords. So very careful when you're actually selecting these keywords, because they actually will ultimately maybe reviewing your paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I also kind of circling back again to what Ellen said about how the tough sort of review market right now. Our next webinar next week is going to focus entirely on the review process from the reviewer's perspective and how to do reviews in a equitable way, with a lot of folks from ASLO, as well as Ellen will be there. But I always try, and I encourage everyone who gets invited to review to try to accept as many as you can, knowing how tough the market is. I currently have a paper in review, I won't say where, but they've invited over 10 reviewers and they've only gotten one back, and I submitted that back in July. So it's a tough world out there. So if you have the time and the bandwidth and you're qualified to review the paper that you get asked to review, I would encourage everyone to do it. I want to move on, leave some time for Q&A, and Varshani actually asked a question in the Q&A that I was also going to pose to you, so I will just read this question. So it asks, how should we approach situations where different reviewers request conflicting or widely divergent revisions? And what process can we establish to decide which feedback to prioritize or reconcile? This is something that I've also experienced a lot, and it's a tough battle to fight.
I can have a go from both sides. No. Usually the rule is that you would like to actually address all the comments from the different reviewers, but sometimes you can actually play one review against the other. So if one reviewer actually says, oh, I don't like this part of the thing, and then you can, and if you actually don't agree with it, says, oh, look, the other reviewer actually said this is actually a good part of the paper or something like that. So you can actually play one of the other. One of the things that you also want to do is to in terms of the reviewer, to tone down the language, and when you're also reviewing and writing a review as well as responding. I had a situation once where this review was so bad in terms of the tone of it and everything. Even the editor wrote to, the covering letter said, can you please be kind to the reviewer? I've never seen that before, because it was just uncalled for. It's in the system. So that's something that you have to actually think about in that system. Yeah.
Yeah, Alan.
I'll just make a quick emphasis on the point that Chari was making, that when you do respond to the reviewers, it's always thank you for your reviews. Use very positive language. We've considered what you're saying, and maybe we disagree, or another reviewer had said this and this is what we decided. But the main thing is, for each point, you just want to thank you for your insights, thank you for saying, whatever it is. So it's just keep it positive. And on the other side, as Chari also said, sometimes the editors have to go back to reviewers and remind them that their language needs to be positive and encouraging as well, even if they disagree.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. Real quick before we get to Frank, I guess I will just iterate for our audience who might not know, when we say you respond to the reviewers, generally journals require you to take all of the reviewers' comments and actually respond like line by line to each little bullet item, even if it's just like, there was a typo. Not just the major comments. Sometimes some journals will give you those little bullet points as well. So you are required to respond to each bullet point and say why you did or didn't do the whatever the reviewer asked. And that is your place to sort of say your piece and say if you didn't do something, why, or anything like that. Like a lot of times if there's comments on a section that I've deleted, based on another reviewer's comments, I will say like based on another reviewer's comments, we deleted this section. Frank.
Yeah, so I think you were just speaking to what I was just about to highlight, that I mean, as authors, you just have to be ready to respond to reviews. I mean, it's not sometimes when students come to me, oh, these reviews are a lot. I mean, do I have to actually respond to all of them? The answer is yes. You have to respond to everything that was given to you. But because remember that these reviewers also take their time to review your documents, so you should be ready to respond to them. But one thing again, emphasizing what Ellen just said, when you respond, for example, you don't agree with a particular comment, just be constructive and be respectful. I mean, if you want your paper to be published, you just have to be constructive. One of the things the language I always use is we appreciate your review or your comments, but however, then you can provide evidence why you are not happy with the comment, or why you think it could have been in a different view. So the key is to be constructive and respond to every comment that was reviewed in the document.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Frank. Laura.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if you're getting reviewer feedback on an aspect, it often means that maybe you could have explained it better. And maybe they don't understand why you've made a decision or how you've done something. And so I also think that's where you can use this response document in your favor as well. You can add a bit to the manuscript, enough to give context, but you can also go into a lot more detail in that response document, and you can provide references and you can explain your thinking. And so you can give full context in your response document and then be like, and in the manuscript, we've addressed it by doing this. And maybe it's just a sentence or two that you've actually changed in the manuscript, but you've been able to explain to the editor and to the reviewers what you're up to. And then just quickly pop back to another question that I think relates to this bit, in that from talking to the other ASLO editors, one of the holdups can be getting these response documents back from authors. That can be a time-consuming process. And so the faster, and I know it can be hard, especially if you've got a big authorship team, but the faster you're able to turn stuff around, and also for me as a reviewer as well, the sooner a document comes back to me revised, the fresher it is in my mind. And the more I'm like, oh, I just looked at this, I can turn it around. Whereas if it goes away for 3 months, 6 months, and then comes back in the reviewed version, it takes me longer probably to get back into that same manuscript. And so there are things that you can do that help speed the process along.
For sure, yeah. I think that's also helpful, sort of, while it's helpful, at least on the author side, to like get some distance from the paper, it's also helpful if it comes back quickly, so then everything's fresh in your mind. And if you have to fix figures, you remember where all the code is and all that sort of fun stuff. So that's always a good turnaround. Is good for everybody on all sides.
One of the things that going to the previous webinar, I tell my students, oh, okay, these reviews are not that good, but it is our responsibility. We haven't actually described and actually presented the material in the way, although we think that it is actually the best that we've done, but reading from another person, they don't think is, so we haven't got the message together. So you have to take the part of the responsibility of having not so positive reviews for yourself as well, in a way. So
for sure. Well, we are almost to the top of the hour, so I want to first thank you all for spending the hour with us and talking with us about all of this. If there are any final thoughts you all have or any final questions from our audience, now is the time.
I mean,
Any of our No, go for it, Frank. Sorry, I didn't see you unmuted.
Just one final thought. Like I always say, review process, no one actually prepares you for these things. Just remember that sometimes when the reviews are not, going your way, you're not happy, you have that window to reach out to the editors and, just write them and they should be able to respond and then help you to navigate those processes. Just to add that again.
I'll add, I might as well add one final thing since this is a learning session is look at your reviews as a learning experience is a bit, I think what Frank was saying too, is that, I think I became a better writer from reviews of my manuscripts. And so, it's an opportunity to say, okay, what did I do wrong? How do I do better? How do I phrase things better? How do I organize better? So, don't worry if you get bad reviews. I mean, I remember the first review of a manuscript I ever got was, I was like, oh my God. And then, but I think it truly helped me. So, yeah, it is a positive process.
Yeah. Just to add one final thought is that reviews and the reviews I got when I started writing my first manuscript, those experiences, those days was actually what actually motivated me to apply for the Relinco Fellowship. And I always say that every day because I saw review process as a very harsh thing. You're receiving all these reviews, you have to go through a lot of harsh comment from reviewers. So those are one of the things that made me to, when I saw the Relinco Fellowship, I said, this is the program. So, and that has actually been able to change the way I see reviews. So I accept them as a way of advancing knowledge and contributing to your own science.
For sure,
I'll also give a little final thing. Writing a paper and reviewers go hand in hand in a way. So my personal experience is that I submitted a paper to JGR and couldn't find the color plates. And those days it was really hard. I had to redo them again. And I applied for this job in Australia, and I was flown out for the interview from England to Australia. I walked into the professor's office and he said, I reviewed your paper, and he had my color plates on his wall. And I thought, I think I have a pretty good chance of getting this job. And that was 37 years ago. So, it can work very positively if you are right place, right time.
Yeah, most reviews are anonymous, but some people nowadays will sign their reviews, and I actually had a very positive experience with someone who signed their review. The review of one of my first papers at a conference. I went up to them and said thank you, and because they had a lot of really great comments, and it turned into a great networking opportunity for me. Laura, any final thoughts from you before we sign off?
I suppose just to reiterate what everyone's been saying, that even though the way we do it can sort of separate the human side from it, publishing in peer review is all just people. And typically your reviewers are giving you comments because they want your work to be the best and the clearest and showcase what you've found. And so hopefully, even though it can be a bit of a scary process, ultimately it will result in your work being shared in the best way, and finding the readers and showcasing all the effort that you've put in.
Yeah, for sure. I think the general consensus is that the reviewers want your paper to succeed, even though sometimes the comments themselves can seem like they suggest otherwise. A pro tip that I always do is when the email comes in, I am always very anxious to read the decision email. So I will skim the decision email, and then I will let it sit for over a weekend or overnight, and then come back to it with a fresh set of eyes. Because often first time you're reading it, you're like, that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't, and then you come back to it a few days later and you're like, actually, yeah, all these comments, some of them make sense, some of them don't. But that's my little pro tip if you get anxious about them like I do sometimes. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming today, to our attendees and our panelists again for their time. a quick reminder, the fourth webinar in this webinar series is next week, and we will be talking about the review process from the reviewer's perspective. So how you can be a good reviewer, how you can become a reviewer. So I encourage you, TOS has a webpage now dedicated to this webinar series with all the registration links. So I encourage you to check that out. Everything is also on the SWMS calendar as well, with all the registration links. So thank you guys again for your time, and we learned a lot, and I hope to see all of you next week.